Hello friends, today we're going to look at an important topic called capital controls and how you will be checkmated and how you can escape from it. So there is a plan to trap you in this check review where you will be left alone and they are giving you entry door, but they are planning to close this door so that you will get trapped here. And that will be happening by something called capital controls, which I'm going to discuss in detail today. And once that happens, you will be checkmated. So I will tell you, explain you how the checkmate is going to be happen. It is already started. The process has started, and I'll also explain how to come avoid the checkmate. So if you look at the situation today, what has happened is in the last 50 years, from 1972 onwards, when Nixon, removed the gold standard onwards, then till then for the last 50 years, whatever you bought that has raised. So for example, if you have bought lands, if you have bought flats, if you have bought shares, mutual funds, or anything where you have invested in the stock market or even in the businesses, or anything you have done that has actually increased in the value, because the thing is that the dollar has been printed enormously without having the gold standard. So government started giving you money, so government started taking you debt, and then you started taking debt on top of it, and then it ballooned like anything. Because of the hyperinflation, you started getting benefited. Now what will happen in future is that the money will go back into the system, because the capital controls will come in place where the government will squeeze money from you, whatever lending. So whatever happened in the 50 years, that might the reverse process might start not at that pace, but it will reverse start. And I'll tell you exactly why it will start, and the entire process, right? So let me explain you very simple with an example so that you understand with it. I know the example may not be too lucrative for you, but please listen to this carefully and you will understand what is exactly happening here, right? So let's take an example that you have Sham's father. Okay, Sham's father has a 30 crore debt, which means you have taken 30 crore loan from three lenders. So let's say it is 10 crores, and then Sham is taking money. Sham's father is taking debt. This is money. In return, he is giving a FDR receipt. So let's assume that each FDR is 1 crore each. So he's taking 1 crore and giving FDR. So like that, he has accumulated 30 crores debt. Right now, this so at the end of the year, Sham is also paying interest on the debt of 2 crores, which is at 7% an annum, right? Approximately. Now, these lenders are also giving loans to the public, right, which is interest on those loans, and they are charging 7% as well. So lenders is at one end, lending to Sham's father, at other end he's lending to the public, right? Now here comes Sham on the other hand is running a chain of schools, right? So he's getting royalty from the schools, multiple schools. Here he's getting royalty, and that is 1 crore per school, and then from multiple schools he's getting 2 crores. And then students are paying fees to the schools. So students are paying school money to the schools. School is paying money to Sham. And because Sham's father is in high debt and Sham belong to the same family, Sham is paying 100% of his profit to Sham's father. Now it might sound, what is this, why he is paying 100%, but it is part of the same family, and I'll explain you that this is also happening in real time in the case which we are going to discuss. So now what has happened is this is working fine, but all of a sudden, these lenders have realized that the Sham's father's debt is going so high that he may not be able to pay us back. Something is wrong with Sham's father. For years he has been taking debt, but he may not be now. So we need to be cautious. So the lenders decided that as my FD renews, as my FDs come, so there are 10 crores renewals that are going to come this year. So as my FD expires, instead of asking for renewal, I will ask for the cash. Now, Shyam's father understood that this is going to come. So then he goes back to Shyam and says that, you know what, when the lenders come for FD deposit, I don't have the money to pay, because if they withdraw, if they don't renew. So what I will do is I will transfer this FD to your name, and then you pay the money to them, and then the name receipt will be transferred. So in that case, what will happen is I will give you interest of only 2% per annum, so that because it is within the family, I can pay you at a lower interest. That way my debt will also be servicing my debt, the cost of servicing my debt will be cheaper as well. So then Sham agreed. Sham is obedient to his father, so he agreed. Now what happens when the Sham's debt is reduced by 2%? automatically the lenders will be forced to lend at a lesser interest, because Sham's father can go and negotiate and telling that the market is at 2%, there are people taking it 2%, so you have to reduce. So this interest also become 2%. And then, because the lenders are lending 1% and 2%, these public will also go and ask and get these interest on loans reduced to 2%. Then, this is one side of the story, which this is off of the plan of Sham's father. On the other side, Sham's father wants to increase the income as well, so that he can take more debt here. So Sham's father says, Sham, go and ask more royalty from the schools, because we own it. So we have capital controls on it. So go and ask more royalties from them. So instead of paying 2 crores totally, now you ask them to pay 3 crores this year, starting this year. And then schools have no choice, but they have to obey. And then they go and charge the students that way. And ultimately, it is student that actually pays to the Sham's father, and they don't know who is actually Sham's father, but then they will be paying without noticing. They'll be crying, but they will be praying. So this is exactly a case which is currently happening, where Sham is actually the US Fed department. So Sham is the US federal government, and this is actually the government, and this is the Fed department. So Sham's Fed department actually controls the banks via the policies. I'm going to explain this clearly in the next slide. So this is the Sham's father is nothing but the US government, and the debt they are issuing is the US bonds. So I'm explaining you here in a very clear way here. So the government, US government, has got $34 trillion of debt. They are lenders, which are commercial banks, and also central banks of other countries like China, Japan, who has taken loans from US government, who has lended to US government, taken bonds, and now they are paying 5% bond interest yield. Now, the government is planning to reduce these bond yields, so that they don't need to pay this much of $2 trillion every year. So they plan to reduce it. So they went to US Fed. Now they are asking Fed that whenever these bonds are renewed, go and own these Feds. So the bonds get transferred here in the Feds. So this is like one pocket of the government. This is another pocket of the government. So it is their own department, and the bond yields are reducing. So US government will be happy that their bonds are getting renewed at a lower interest. Now, at the other hand, US Fed controls the banks with the policies. So they are going to play around with this reverse repo rate and CRR, and tell that you have to deposit. So CRR is cash reserve ratio, where banks have to deposit more money. So what will happen, and what is going to happen very soon, is that the government will create a liquidity issue, where, and then as the liquidity issue happen, banks will be in danger, and then government will come in policies telling that have to deposit more CRR with us, so that we are in control, so that public don't be in loss. But it's actually this game which is happening. So 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 banks will be forced to deposit more money, and that money will be used to buy these bonds, because the Fed doesn't have money. So so what is happening now is Fed has a balance sheet. So I'll explain that balance sheet in some time. So these banks, because they have to deposit things, their loans, the loans they wanted to give becomes expensive, because they have less cash to play around with the loans. So then the business loans gets expensive, then the home loans gets expensive, because that is the because of the CRR and the reverse repo reductions in the. So if reverse repo is the money which banks deposit with the US Fed, and US Fed pays interest for that. So if the banks are being forced to deposit, but the rate of interest which US Fed is going to give low, then banks will be reluctant, and that is when the capital controls come into picture, where Fed will say, boss, if you want to run a bank in US, you have to be like that. Now India is also doing that. You can see last week's news, government is playing that there is a risk. RBI is telling that, which is like our US Fed is telling that cash reserve ratio has to be lifted, and they are already issued a notice for that this has to be. They are creating a problem, telling that there is a liquidity, but this is the same game which even the Indian government is playing here. So banks will be at a loss. The other loans which are not linked to the reverse repo or your RBI interest rates will be charge high. So your car loans, your personal loans and all will become expensive. Now it will not become directly expensive now, because this is the capital controls they are employing, but before this they are going to trap you as well. So what they are doing is, so what they are doing is, if you see the treasury bonds here, US treasury bonds is actually 2 years bonds, it has reduced from 5% to 3%. So this means the bond yields, this is reducing. So this is reducing. As this reduces, the guys who are holding, the US government has to pay lesser interest to these people, the banks and also the central banks of the other countries, right? At the other hand, when this gets transferred, so US Fed, what it is doing, it is increasing it. It has to take these bonds at a lower interest, right? So currently the interest rates are still 5. So when it becomes 2%, that is when the Fed has to take money. So Fed is what it is doing, it is preparing for that event. So what it is doing right now, it is reducing the balance sheets, so that when the interest becomes 2%, it's going to take it, it's going to start. So you can see the Fed balance sheet here. Fed balance sheet here as of today, September 3rd, it was 9 trillion. Now it has come back to 7 trillion. So they are reducing this balance sheet. They'll reduce it till 4 trillion or 3 trillion. And then when the interest rate gets lower, they will start taking this debt, because these guys will be dumping, because the interest rates will be less. As these guys will be dumping, the Fed will be taking. But will the government allow the Bank of China and Japan can dump, but the Citibank, if it tries to dump, government will employ what you call capital control, which means they will be forced to buy the bonds. They will be forced to buy the bond at a lower interest, and Fed will be asked to buy the bonds at a lower interest. And then you can also already see that interest rates, 30 countries have already reduced interest rates in the last 4 months. US is also going to reduce the interest rates. So from 5%, it's going to reduce. So you can see the interest rates of US here. So US interest rates is here is 5.3 today, which has been the case for almost since 1 year now. But now that will get reduced now. As the interest gets reduced, what happens is the FFR, which is called Fed Funds Target Rates, is now 5%, and it will come down. Now, what what will happen is government. So, where is the trap here? Government is going to trap you in cheaper loans. So you feel that, so government is trapping you at different places, right? So as a general public, first they are employing capital controls on the bank, so that as businesses and public, your cost of loan borrowing will kick them up. Now you might say that interest rates are low, but they to avoid this halla, they are actually reducing the interest rate. They're going to reduce the interest rate so that public can easily borrow more and then pay these charges to the banks, and the banks can from the banks, the US Fed can collect and increase their balance sheets in the cash, right? And then buy the US Treasury bonds at later. So they are preparing for this. Now what they are doing is, by reducing these interest rates, they are forcing you in a trap. They are forcing you in a trap, telling that next hyperinflation will come. Yes, it will come for the next 2 years, but after that, you will be trapped where the government will actually start increasing the rates. And whatever the last 50 years you were benefiting from the interest rates, now it is a loss going to be happening. So, how is the checkmate going to happen? How they plan to checkmate you is there are various stages. First stage is reduce the bond yields, reduce the Fed balance sheet, and then reduce the interest rates. That is the stage one, which they are doing it. And I showed you the graphs. They are three doing it. Now, stage two is when the rates go low, when all this gets low after an year or 2 years, then they will introduce more capital controls to force the bank to start buying the bonds at lower rates. They will ask Fed balance sheets to be increased at a cheaper loans, so that the US Fed can, US government can actually renew their bonds at a cheaper rate, and then trap people with leverage loans, trap businesses with leverage loans, cheaper floating rates. So, and then you will take floating rates, and then as it increases, you will be trapped. And the checkmate stage will be when, when the reverse of this will happen, which is after an year or two. And then these bond yields will start increasing, inflation will start increasing, Fed interest rates will start increasing, and that is the end game, is that banks will squeeze more money from the public, and the Fed will squeeze more money from the bank, and the government will squeeze more money from the Fed, and that is the huge mega transfer of money, of wealth, that is going to happen from public to the government. You'll have no choice. You'll have no choice because the government is already playing you and trapping you in that game. You'll be leveraged at that time.